Hello, I'm Joe with Photomatthew Studios, and today I'm going to be talking through a photo book. I'm super excited for this one. This is one of my favourite ones in my entire collection. Tokyo Love by Nobuyoshi Araki and Goldin. It's a really interesting one. I was hesitant to buy it at first because it is slightly on the pricey side, but it's a book I find myself consistently coming back to. And I think that's just because of mainly because of the two artists themselves. I mean, a lot of people know about Goldin, and Nobuyoshi Araki is also very popular and has been, both of them are really both popular artists. But the interesting part comes with that Araki's name rarely comes without the tagline, controversial photographer, and now Goldin has also been quite controversial in the past, but their public opinion on them is very different. Araki is often cited as being seen as quite misogynistic, as Goldin can be seen as a feminist photographer, which makes this book even more interesting when you see how almost seamlessly their work comes together, and you can, at certain points in the book, you struggle to pick out who's shot which photograph. So I'm going to start. This is the Scalo first edition that was released in 1995. The series was shot in 1994. The series is also known as Spring Fever, 1994. So 4 years after the death of Araki's wife, Yoko, and that plays a big role in this sort of book, and it was sort of an opportunity for both these artists to sort of get over that, as Goldin in the foreword says, "I'll help you get over the death of your wife," and Araki also wanted it to treat as an example for her to get over the loss of a lot of the friends she lost during the AIDS crisis in New York. And so they sort of hunted down what Nan calls her tribe, who feature heavily in the Ballad of Sexual Dependency, and they hunt that sort of community down in Japan and sort of explore the youth culture there during the spring, hence the subtitle Spring Fever. So here we have the plate list, and throughout the book it goes back and forth between Nan and Araki, and it's an interesting interplay. You kind of have two series going on. You have Nan's sort of photo diary and what you'd expect, and Araki's as well, but also a series of portraits that run all the way through that are shot by Araki. But we open on this image, which already, in a practice run to this video, I thought in my head that Araki shot this sort of establishing shot for the series, but actually it is a Goldin shot, and it is of the cherry blossom leaves, and you have these lanterns running through it with little sakura leaves on it all the way through, and that sets the tone for the entire series, which is set in spring, which in Japan, the cherry blossoms are tied deeply to that. And then we come to the first two portraits, which is shot by Araki, and they are atypical for Araki. They're definitely still his, and he did in the 90s also use these colourful backgrounds a lot more intensely in some other series. But the interesting thing about here is in the foreword he actually says, "I shot portraits, which I rarely do," which is, it puzzles me, because he shoots a lot of pictures of people but doesn't consider them portraits, and I guess that kind of ties in with maybe his bondage imagery, where then they aren't portraits, they're pictures of people, which there is a difference, but it's kind of hard to pinpoint down. But he does consider these portraits are shot in the studio, and they're all of adolescent teenagers in Japan, sort of going with the theme of spring and blossoming, and the idea of the symbolism of the season and stuff. And then we have two by Goldin, which also these are in a lovely hotel, and these are the other type of images in the series. So these first sort of 5 pages of the book, you set up the place and the time of year, and then you have sort of what Araki's doing, some of what Goldin's doing, and then after that they sort of blend together and it goes back and forth. The interesting thing I find about these portraits as well, though, is not necessarily the people, but the fashion. Like, for example, on this shot here, you have really interesting clothes of what was popular with the youth culture in this bag with the little teddy bears on it and stuff. It kind of brings fashion and photography together in a way where photography is still doing what it does best, which is age really well and kind of let you look back on stuff and go, "Oh, that's interesting, that's rad." Yeah. And then we have some more of this couple in Japan, and you really sort of get this interesting idea of like Nan finding her so-called tribe in Japan as well, and these images do feel like her images from the Ballad of Sexual Dependency and what she's been producing. More portraits. As it goes on, it's quite interesting. Araki as well said he wanted to shoot without being selective and just publish everything basically, as Nan supposedly, according to Araki, wanted to be more selective. So it's kind of that's maybe where their two styles sort of clash as before they've merged together really well. And Nan also acknowledges in the front that she was fascinated to find a man who was working almost identically to her all the way across the world, and the fact that they find each other so similar despite the public opinion of them being that they're not together is quite interesting, which is why I find this book interesting, because it kind of calls into question that thing. And I think for people who maybe don't know Araki's work as well, it's a good place to start, because a lot more people know Nan Goldin's work, and then from there it kind of gives you an M. This is interesting as well, this pose that comes up in these portraits. It's quite typical of an Araki photo outside the studio, but it's interesting that it's kind of plotting here. I also like that you come into play this Araki's more is more mentality, and he's kind of not seeking perfection, like this dirty studio floor that I couldn't imagine another photographer letting be in the final publication. Obviously, these two artists you're going to have nudes, so if you're seeing this page, you're on Patreon, and thank you very much for supporting. If not, you're missing out. We have some nude shot in here. I'm not entirely sure who shot these, but it could have been either of the artists. As with the whole book, it could have been either of the artists. You'll be able to look in the front to find out, but these are quite interesting on their own, sort of just coming off the back of, say, like Tokyo Lucky Hole and things like that, and Nan Goldin's work, it kind of, it comes together. Back to portrait as well. These are interesting because they're the wrong way around, quote unquote. This kind of really calls attention to the interesting format of the book, which is this long landscape format, which I really am quite a fan of, and I haven't got anything else that's quite like it in my collection, so it's really interesting for me to see this. We have some close-ups of these two girls that have a very similar hairstyle. Now we move the book back again. I hope it's still in frame for the video. We should be okay then. More shots of interiors. And kind of, for me in these ones, the backgrounds kind of stand out for me as they're very reminiscent of like Nan Goldin's work in New York and stuff, where she's kind of got this big focus on the rooms. And if you go through the Ballad of Sexual Dependency, you can kind of pin out bits where she goes, Cookie in the yellow room, or someone in a green room and stuff like that. And he'll even have a TV featuring it back in an old games console in this one, which is really cool to see. And it's kind of what I find interesting in photography is when you look back on, even only, this is 1994, we're in 2021 now, so you're only talking, 20, 30 years, but it's still kind of interesting to see how much stuff has changed. More verticals, really cool fashion here with the beanie going on and sort of the sunglasses, and it's interesting to look back when I see stuff like this, because like these hats are kind of getting popular again, and sort of it's that 30-year cycle of stuff coming back in. Last couple of years we had Stranger Things coming back with the 80s, and now the 90s seem to be coming back all of a sudden, which makes this book even cooler in my opinion. Oh, these are cool. So these another thing that both the artists have in common, which seems to be blurry photographs being kept in the final series, which I absolutely love, especially in this day and age where sort of photography seems to be leaning, so what's the sharpest, let's get as much detail as possible, but that doesn't really give a good mood sometimes, and this sort of comes through. I really like the smoke work here, the smoke coming off, it almost looks like fingerprints in the air the way it comes through. But getting more colourful here with these portraits. These are really interesting because they still feel, despite being in a studio, and clearly quite a big studio, they don't drain out the energy of the shoot, which some studio photos can feel a bit stiff and posed. These feel very energetic and still snapshotty, which you're going to get if you know Araki at all. He's a very energetic photographer, but I do like the energy. I also like, I'm not sure, I don't want to damage the book, but her jeans are actually dirty, and it kind of gives you a little story into the shoot. Maybe they were just pulling people off the street in the day and saying, "You look cool, come do a photo shoot." There's more. This almost feels like someone who, she's very reminiscent of Nan Goldin. This is quite weird. Maybe she found someone who's very much like her in Japan, especially with that hair and the pose as well with the cigarette. It's almost all her iconography in one place, even the Marlboros. Portraits, this page really trying to mess with us with one landscape, one portrait, but again, very cool, very old Apple logo sneaking in here. More of these people together. More portraits. A shirt with just hearts with different types of alcohol on it. These are quite cool. Actually themes here of the sort of LGBTQ, which Nan's known for, you know, coming in. It seems like these could be a lesbian couple in Japan that they found. You know, these are probably the only ones that I could safely say are probably Nan Golding's, as Araki doesn't tend to shoot men nude that much, never mind gay men that much. So if I had to gamble, I'd say these were Nan Goldin shots, but either way, very cool, and I love the environment of sort of the sewing machine stuff going on. You know, he has a sewing machine, but he has ripped jeans. That's fashion for you. Even more. These are pretty cool portraits of these guys. Very cool, we've got a young kid here. And tattoos, which, you know, they definitely found a subculture in Japan. And tattoos are very sort of hidden. Smoking in the studio. I'm not allowed to do that anymore. So yeah, this, I love this shirt that just says milk. And these platform Converses as well. As I say, as you get more into the book, it kind of stops mattering who shot which photos. They kind of just, you know, you barely can tell the difference between the two different styles because they are very close, and that's what I find most interesting about it, is these two photographers coming together and just sort of shooting loads in the springtime, which is a very short period in 1 year, given how many photos there are, you know what I mean? This is an awesome pose with their hands in the hair, actually. Quite like this one. We've got a transgender individual here, which is, you know, typical of Nan's work, which explores sort of gender and sexuality. So for her to find it in Japan, it's kind of like this alternate universe version of Nan Goldin coming through that we see. It's more close-up on the face. These are interesting. It seems like as well, during the series, they started getting into the nightlife and where these people were hanging out and stuff, as there starts to be more club photos and starts to build this sense of even more energy coming through. This shirt with the guns is so awesome. I love she has her hands up as well. That's in the moment idea. Another shot, not a portrait of someone, but also really adds to the sort of another establishing shot for this transition as the sort of out and about photos start to bleed in, because before this point we kind of see just photos of people in their houses or in the studio. So now we start to see, still this series is still flowing through, but we see more clubs and people dancing, having fun and stuff. And this is that sort of idea of Araki had with the series of wanting to sort of bubble over in ecstasy and sort of just really enjoy life and sort of live it up with Nan, basically. And these start to feel like almost colour versions of like Tokyo Lucky Hole, the previous Araki series, but with a lot more. It's different because it's a lot more maybe sensitively approached, and Araki doesn't feature as much, and they're a lot less explicit. There is nudity, but they're not as hyperly sexual as that one, where he was exploring the sex clubs. There's some stuff. You know, I said that, and I'm completely wrong, because now we have dominatrix shots. Someone being tied up, which is kind of. I'm trying to think in my head when Araki started got really famous in, you know, the West and became this controversial figure with his sort of bondage photography. But maybe this is maybe a bit after, maybe it's around a similar time. Very 90s look going on here. The series also gets more explicit as it goes on. I've noticed this time reading through it. It seemed very... so this is obviously a Patreon page. We're back again. And we kind of... This is kind of atypical for something Araki would produce. It's very rare to see the man in the submissive position in an Araki photo, but maybe it was an Goldin shot. Who knows, to be honest. But I think it's also ties in with that idea of him wanting to not be selective and just sort of fire away at everything and just really live as much as possible. And for Araki, pressing the shutter is his heartbeat, so I guess he's shooting more. Those are quite cool as well. Oh, a lizard popping up in the series. Very nice. What goes on? Yeah, these ones start to feel a bit more like Nan Goldin, where she was exploring drag queens and things like this, these kind of shots in the dressing rooms and things like that of people getting ready. And the book continues to flip back and forth like this. This shot's awesome. I love this shot with the cherry blossoms kind of falling off the trees and stuff, and it's almost caught in a way where it almost looks like rain or snow or something, and they kind of, there's a lot of energy in this shot. And then this guy appears again here as well, but I really like it. It kind of, it reminds you of the time when this is set, if you know what I mean, and it kind of connects you with that pinpoint of time as you kind of, if you tried to track it through the thing, you'd lose track with it being at night and then in someone's house, and then you'd lose, you know, they were probably losing track of time themselves shooting in nightclubs and in the studio, and it seems like they were constantly going throughout this entire series, just trying to keep themselves busy. Milk International. I'm going to have to look up this milk company. I want to know if it still exists, because this stuff looks really awesome. So maybe the next video I will be wearing a milk shirt. Mirror shot. I believe this is the portrait on the front cover, actually. Yeah, which makes you wonder why this one was picked out. I'm not really sure. Maybe he just wanted to say... I mean, it has all the stuff there, the fashion of the time, the adolescence, and the colours in the background and stuff. Maybe it was just his favourite, I don't know. Or it was selected by the publishing company, I'm not sure. It's interesting to note as well, this was printed in Germany, which I'm not sure how much of a affinity each artist has with Germany. I know Nam Golding's worked in there, and so have Araki, but it seems interesting that the book was picked there. These are very cool photos. These kind of give me vibes of like a Takashi Miike film or something, like like a Yakuza film. Very cool, dude. Oh, this is Nan's cover photo as well. So this guy has actually been in quite a few. Maybe there was some sort of connection there, and that explains why he's on the front cover with this photo here. And this is a very typical Nan Goldin photo. Someone sat on their bed with no top on. I mean, if that doesn't sum up her work, I don't know what does. That watch is awesome. I feel like you'd struggle to read it though, but it looks cool. And then lots of portraits. And there's this big scar down here, which kind of really adds to the story. And it's very typical of Nan to sort of document ailment and illness and stuff. And that's probably the only reference to it in the whole series, really, to this sort of underlying sadness. And it's kind of makes sense. It's near the end, as Araki says earlier. It's like he wanted to have a ball anyway, but he knows death creeps up from behind and stuff, and he's trying to get Nan to forget. So maybe as we sort of get to the end of the book, it's sort of reminding that they have to go back to what they used to. This is awesome. I like the throughout this sort of studio series, I like the constant sort of playfulness and sort of willing to improvise and stuff, because I feel like maybe Araki went in with, he wanted this pose from all of the models because it appears so constantly, but he was very open to sort of, let's just play and just be energetic and sort of let them do what we want, and we'll take the one where they've had an idea rather than strictly sitting to the formula, and I think it works really well. I have a couple. Together. God, the fashion's coming in very strong. These guys are awesome. Another sort of underground club they seem to have found. This picture I often find when I was looking into the book to try and find some more details and stuff, comes up all the time, of heartfelt imagery, and they sort of come together. There's a lot of smoking going on in these studio shots, which is kind of interesting to look back on and just see how things have changed. This is quite cool. It's one of the ones where it's not someone's face, just their hair drips over the side. It's rather an interesting look in the series. And also, actually, going back, a big smiling face. Araki says after this series he wasn't afraid of showing people with their mouths open or smiling or having fun and stuff, which is nice to see, even though it happened 30 years ago, and like judging by his other books he kind of stuck to that. But it's interesting when you look at a lot of other photographers' work where it has to be, and even like small photographers who do shoots, they're like, we want this shot to be arty, so look moody and stuff like that. It's kind of like, it's nice to see people having fun and being happy and things like that, as opposed to the sort of the deadpan aesthetic that exists in the art world, especially in photography. Big group shot here, which is kind of one of the few in the book, actually, I think. Wall studio and the dirty studio floor, which I kind of like, I'm not gonna lie. More old TVs, and just sometimes the backgrounds are more interesting, but people are interesting as well. This is another person who would be typical of Nam Goldin, sort of, whether she's drag queen or just transgender, I'm not sure, but these are cool photos to see. It makes me wonder, it's kind of this thing where it's like maybe Nam just gravitates to these people, they gravitate to her just to be able to go to the other side of the planet and find those type of people, you know what I mean? It's an impressive skill, I can imagine. Be interesting to see her work in other parts of the world as well. Oh, 2 people in the studio at once. Oh, that's the first for this. So very cool. Baggy trousers, that was the 90s. It's like skateboarding. Yeah, as we reach the end of the series, it just sort of, you know, it keeps going. It's kind of a lot, but I do find it interesting that each page is one photo for each one. As with a lot of Araki books you can find, sometimes there'll be a page where it'll have 80 photos on it, or lots of little photos, and sort of they overlap and blend together. So this kind of, I feel like even though he didn't want to be selective, he probably had to, because this is for him a short series. You know what I mean? As for anyone else, this is sort of an impressive body of work. Yeah, this character's appeared a few times, or this person's appeared a few times. It kind of feels like an Nam Goldin subject. These portraits, and then we come to, oh, there's one more. And then we come to a final page where it's portraits that the artist shot of each other. So Araki shot Nan, and Nan shot Araki. And this kind of typifies the bubbling over and ecstasy sort of idea he's going for. He quite literally is. And you can even see a little lipstick mark on his cheek. He's always having fun, especially now, and it's kind of like maybe Nan succeeded in a goal of getting him over his wife, which, for better or worse, I suppose. And then this shot of Nam Goldin, which Araki completely switched his style again from, you know, the studio portraits and what he's known for, but he goes back to actually a style that's kind of typical of Sentimental Journey and Winter Journey, the black and white style, and even with the dates in, which he tends to use. Whether that date's accurate or not, who knows? He has been known to change them, but I think it is. It says 94 at the bottom, so kind of marking that it was shot in this time period when it was Nan. And then we end on Nan's closing shot, which I also thought was an Araki shot, because it's quite typical of him, of the sort of a dark shot, so it's kind of nights coming in, lights fading, and this we had at the start the leaves on the trees, and then in the middle where they were all brushing down, and then now at the end where they're all on the floor, and it springs over, end of the book, boom, end credits. And that is Tokyo Love Spring Fever 1994 by Nobuyoshi Araki and Nam Goldin, one of my favourite books in my collection, and one of the most interesting books, I think, just because of the 2 artists that come through, and sort of especially as it ages, sort of looking back on the time period, and it's just a really nice photo book, and the really unique aspect ratio as well, of being a landscape book, which it's the only one. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you were watching on Patreon, thank you very much for supporting us, and I hope the extra content in there has been worth it for you. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to see the rest of the series, some of the shots we had to cut for YouTube reasons because they're slightly explicit, then go over to the Patreon, check it out, and all the other content on there as well. But thank you for watching.